You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey vet rehabbers, this week Angela Griffiths from Griffiths Veterinary Rehabilitation and Hydrotherapy in the UK joins me to discuss pool or underwater treadmill for the vet rehab or hydro startup. Now we dive into what the factors we should consider. We look at things like your qualification, what type of client base you've got. It's really not a clear-cut, easy decision. But this conversation, I think, will give you loads of school for thought and potentially save you some time in your thought process. I'm really excited to announce that we have updated the webinars and our free limited access membership of Onlinepethealth. They are muscle activation and cruciate disease on our small animal platform, and that's with Carrie Adrian. For the equine webinar, it's Equine Introduction to Neonatal Physiotherapy with Heli Hayatinen. And on the hydrotherapy side, it's Amy Kings with the clinical management of forelimb lameness. Now, in our paid platform, we now have 186 hours of small animal webinars, 120 hours of equine webinars, and 88 hours of hydrotherapy webinars. You can access this free platform with these three new updated free webinars on onlinepethealth.com/free. Before we head over to my chat with Angela, a quick word from our sponsor. Curacao Vets founder and CEO Dr. Nada Robinson has been teaching science-based integrative medicine for nearly 25 years. She first developed her courses at the Colorado State University, where she started the Medical Acupuncture for Veterinarian Certification program in 1998. In so doing, Dr. Robinson developed a science-based platform for veterinary acupuncture, the first of its kind. Today, Curacao Vet offers a comprehensive curriculum in integrative medicine with a rational, evidence-supported foundation. Courses include medical acupuncture, photomedicine, botanical medicine, medical massage, and integrative rehabilitation. You can discover Curacao Vet at curacao.org. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this one. Over to Angela. Hey, Angela, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Megan. Nice to be back.
Do you want to tell us where you've been? Because you've had an exciting few weeks, haven't you?
Well, now COVID's not over, obviously, but now travel can happen. We are kind of catching up with our overseas courses. So I've just been to Singapore for the second time this year. I had a really good group of professional sort of level human therapists coming into hydro, and we had that in March and we just had it in October. So we've run our standard level 3 training, and then we also provided level 4 training, so taking people on with more advanced treadmill skills, gait assessment, etc. Got chased by a monkey in the park doing gait assessment. That was interesting. Monkeys can run faster than me, I now know that. And what else have we done? Yeah, we went to the Singapore Vet Show, because that's been cancelled the last couple of years. So that was good for contacts. Meet a lot of people there that have come from ASEAN region, but also as far as India, Australia, New Zealand. So those groups could travel again for the first time. Yeah, so it's an interesting and exciting time, I think. And
Awesome.
then I should have been going to Hong Kong, but it's still a bit scary about getting locked down. So we're doing another trip in February back to Hong Kong, where I've got students that have been waiting for 2.5 years for us to get there and finish their practical training. So they didn't even have a centre when they started, but now they're practicing. So they sort of badly need us to be there and handhold them through a few cases. And also education about pain is very, very needed. So some client talks and evening talks with general sort of dog owner community, dispelling some of the myths about how dogs show pain and exhibit pain and how we deal with it and manage it. So I really enjoy that side of the work. While we're there, we can then reach out to the community, hopefully change hearts and minds a little bit.
Today, Angela and I are going to be talking about choosing an underwater treadmill or pool for a rehab startup. And this is a question that comes up all the time, and it was even a question I remember for myself. When I started my practice, what should I do? And there's these, two choices, the one being a whole lot more expensive than the other one. But, so the underwater treadmill, that's the most expensive one. But then the pool is also quite an expense. And if you don't have your own property, then you're putting it into a rented property. It's not easy to remove. We can chat about ones that are on top of the ground, ones that are in the ground, but there's so many considerations. So I thought I'd bring Angela on so we can just dive deep into all these considerations and just, talk about all the things that we should be considering. So if you are there and you're thinking, I want to open up a hydrotherapy center or a vet rehab clinic and I want hydrotherapy, I'm not sure what to do, this is the life for you. So we're going to dive really, really deep into this. So Angela, I know this is a question that you get asked all the time from your students. So what are the things that we need to consider? Maybe you can just list all the things and then we can go through each one and talk about each one in a little bit more depth.
I think the first thing is, what area are you in? What's your clientele? Who's going to be coming to you? Are you looking at more of a general public or sort of almost self-referral? Or if you're you're in an area where you've got a lot of specialist orthopedic and neuro centres, what those vets referring want for rehab or for hydro, or think they want, which is a different thing. It's really about how you're going to pay the bills as well. So I would say that the treadmill, the cost of the equipment, the cost of maintenance precludes it for a lot of people as a startup thing. I think it's easier to fill the pool. You can use it with a lot more cases than you can water treadmill, in my opinion. And it gives you a basis. If you're new and you're a startup, you need to learn your craft, before going straight in. So it depends. If you've worked for someone else, you have experience with water treadmill, that might give you more confidence moving that way. If you're a really new startup, you just completed your training, it might be better to start with a pool. And I would say as an income stream, that's going to probably work better for you. But there's so many caveats to that about what country you're in, who's referring to you, what's expected, what's wanted, what you want to do, really.
Yeah. I mean, so let's say you already got quite a good client base. Maybe you've been a mobile practitioner up until now, but you do have surgeons that are referring to you. So you'd have post-operative cases. You'd have pretty much a mixture of cases. Would you recommend then the pool or the underwater treadmill?
I would probably go pool, because there's more of the cases that I can deal with in the pool than I can in the water treadmill. It is a really difficult choice, because if you're post-operative hip replacement, or TPLO or patella luxation, you're probably going to be wanting to head to water treadmill for gait retraining. If you've got more spinal cases and neurological cases, then again, the water treadmill is invaluable. However, if you look at your general referral base, I would say, then if you're looking at, say, conservative management of hip dysplasia, you're looking at a really big population of both younger and older dogs with osteoarthritis, which I would say is sort of top of, even though we as a practice ourselves do a lot of referral specialist work, I would still say the bulk of our income comes from those long-term clients where it's lifelong care. So the cost for some clients, if they're post-operative, they'll do the 10 sessions or maybe work up to 20 sessions on the hydro treadmill and then they'll be gone. Or they would perhaps change to pool. And if you don't have that facility, they're going to be going somewhere else, because the cost of providing that treadmill care is so expensive. And in their eyes, the dog is fixed. So, but if you're looking at lifelong management cases and really loyal clients that are going to be with you 4, 5, 10 years, in our case, some people 15 years were on dog 2 or 3, then it's the pool that really provides that benefit. But it's not as simple as just a pool. It's what size of pool, as you alluded to, and whether it's in ground or above ground. If you don't own the premises, then is your landlord going to let you dig a bigger hole and put an in-ground pool, or are you restricted to an above ground pool? And what size can you fit into those premises as well? So there's lots of things around it. But I think the primary thing is, what's your client base? So are you also a new startup hydrotherapist just coming straight in as a hydrotherapist, or as you just mentioned, are you someone that's a vet physio, who's got an existing client base that they've been visiting at home and they want to add hydro as another option, an on-site visited option. So that person, that vet physio with an existing clientele, is going to be looking at something different and probably go more towards a water treadmill, I suspect, because of the technical aspects of it, and it fits more easily with how vet physios think about hydro. They would be pushed more towards that, I feel, because of the combination with land-based, as opposed to pure hydro and startup hydrotherapists going to the pool.
Thanks, Angela. Angela, we've spoken obviously about space. I mean, one of the things that I think of when I opened my practice, I was renting. I didn't have a lot of space, and I really only had indoor space. And so usually when you're in that situation, the underwater treadmill is preferred, right? Because you can fit it in a whole lot easier. You don't have to have the tanks inside. You can park the tanks outside, and depending on where you are in the world, it might be better or not, but you can put covers over them to protect them from the elements outside. So let's chat about that. Let's chat about space. So I've obviously explained now the situation when you've got a small amount of space and you've only got inside. You can also build a pool inside above ground, right?
Yeah. And a smallish pool takes up a similar amount of space to a water treadmill, because with the water treadmill, you do have to, even if you put the tanks outside, you've still got to have room for the filtration unit, the heating, the control unit. You've got the length of the treadmill, plus you've got the ramps, and then you've got the space when the dog comes off the ramp. So treadmills take up a surprising amount of space, and you need that around space so you can work around, look at the dog, etc., fit the client in too. So they could be, I would still say pool will take up more, even a small pool, but it's not as dissimilar as you might think, because you need that space around the treadmill. So you start adding on length of dog, what size of dogs have you got, and you've suddenly got quite a big room that you need, really. And it's always bigger than the treadmill suppliers tell you, because their target market is very much vet practices who think they can just add a treadmill in a side room and that'll be fine, and that's an added income stream. So they need to convince them, yes, they can fit it in that X consult room, and it is just simply not the case. So I think if you're going to be renting somewhere, always, even at your startup, even if you think you're going to be there for years, always have as a backstop, can I move my equipment? What will the cost of moving that equipment be? Do I need specialist people to do it? So absolutely, with the treadmill you do, with the pool less so, depending on whether it's a frame pool with a liner or whether it's fiberglass kit or bolt together pool. So you've got that to think about as well. How easily can you pick up sticks and move, where you've got landlords who are raising rents and they've been artificially held low because of COVID and other considerations, and now probably recession in quite a few countries. So you're also going to be looking at landlords who are going to want to hike the rent, especially if they think you're successful, so once you get to years perhaps 3 to 5, then they're going to be looking at maximizing their income from that space. How easily can you convince them that if it doesn't work out, you can move? Or are they actually going to think they've got you trapped and you have no choice? So these are the things to think about. It's a bit of a downer actually, but you need to be thinking about that right at the beginning. How are you going to protect your business going forwards? If things don't work out quite right, you're not in quite the right space, or the parking doesn't work out, or things like that, you haven't got it quite right, how flexible are you about moving? So whereas if you own your own property and you're digging a hole and then you have a choice whether it's indoors, outdoors, it puts you in a very different position, as does having a very long, very secure lease. So it's all about that security for your business, I feel, as well.
Yeah, so Angela, you did a great lecture, and I can't even remember how many years ago it was. It might have been 2 or 3 at the Vet Rehab Summit. For those of you that attended, we just had the Vet Rehab
More
Summit.
like 4 or 5, I think, actually.
Was it that long?
It's got to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it was our 6th Vet Rehab Summit last Saturday, the 6th one. I actually couldn't believe it. But anyway, you did this great lecture on what to consider when purchasing an underwater treadmill. So for those of you that are online Pet Health members, if you're in this situation right now when you're trying to decide whether to buy an underwater treadmill or not, you need to go and look at that lecture.
Yeah.
So after I watched your lecture, I had a few oh my gosh moments, like, thank goodness that didn't actually work out bad for me, but I did not consider that, when I
Yeah.
bought mine. I just jumped in feet first,
Yeah.
get the underwater treadmill, didn't think about any of the other things. So one of the things that we need to consider with this is maintenance, right?
Yeah.
So like, first of all, like the time that is going to be involved in to maintain the equipment from our side. If there is a problem with the equipment, do we have someone that can fix it? I mean, does the supplier that we've bought the equipment from have people in your country that can actually service the equipment or fix it? Because any day, 2 days, 3 days, a week of downtime when you've just
It's
got an
massive.
underwater
Yeah.
treadmill is huge for your
Yeah.
business. And I actually had insurance against that. So I took out insurance that if my underwater treadmill wasn't working, that I think it was more than 24 hours. So I had one day, like anything more than 24 hours, if something broke and it wasn't fixed, then I could claim from basically like a income protection from your asset. And I had to claim a few times from it. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't have had that, it really would have impacted on my business, because I had a lot of people that I employed that were primarily around the underwater treadmill. And if they weren't doing underwater treadmill,
Yeah.
those days
Absolutely.
add
Yeah.
up, and then suddenly I don't have the income to pay them. So yeah, let's chat a bit about
I
this
think
whole part.
I think when you're buying now, things have changed a bit. So probably the people that I would have recommended, perhaps 5 years or 7 or 8 years ago, are not who I would necessarily recommend now. And one of the primary reasons for that is reliability of equipment and reliability of service. So yes, your equipment breaks down. Not even are the technicians or engineers in your country, but how near are they to you? Is it half a day for them to get to you? So they're wasting all that time with their engineers. And then there's only so many jobs the engineers can do in a week, and you're number three in line. Sometimes I'm jumping up and down going, this is crazy. I've got a training course. So not only am I losing my clients that would be there, I've got 10 people arriving to do a training course and a dead treadmill, which is one of the more stressful things you have to deal with. So reliability is massive, but so also is that relationship with the supplier and the company. Do they care about you? Do they care about your business? Or are you just one amongst many, and you'll just go on the list and they'll get to you when they get to you? I think there's a huge failure on the part of some of the manufacturers to understand, how vital keeping up and running is. You can't just reschedule those appointments. If they've missed an appointment, they've missed. You can't do twice as many hydro sessions and catch up. It's just not
Yeah.
feasible or ethical to try and do. So, is there someone at the end of the phone? Also, now some of the manufacturers are adding in a bit like we have with cars now, that you can, over the internet, they can diagnose faults. I mean, we're lucky that sort of we have probably higher technical skills in some places, but that's from years of breakdown and experience about how we fix things or how we do workarounds. So if they can diagnose the fault over the internet, come back to you, give you instructions, and get you back up and running, then that's just great. If they can just see, look, it's your heater that's broken down or it's a bearing, then at least they bring the right parts, because you've also got the problem if they arrive and the parts aren't right. And then they go away, and that's it for 48 more hours. And do they cover weekends? Really busy time for a lot of rehab people. No one's answering the phone till Monday morning. Stuff like this drives you crazy, and it's really stressful. And like you say, you've still got to pay your staff. The pool, in that respect, I think is more reliable, unless you have a absolutely major thing like splitting the liner that's not fixable. But you can switch in a new heater, you can switch in a new pump, you can deal with a lot of stuff if you're fairly practical yourself. Whereas with the treadmill, you're totally relying on those engineers. And then again, if you're in a country where that equipment's being supplied, who are they deputizing to fix the treadmill, or has someone got to get on a plane to you? And your downtime isn't going to be a day, it's going to be a week and a half if you're lucky. So all of these things come to play. Going back to the Singapore thing, I was saying to you that there are manufacturers now starting to come online and doing designs, etc., for what we call the ASEAN region. So Thailand, Singapore, Taiwan, even down to Australia. And some of those sort of tiger countries, I suppose, are looking at manufacturing for themselves. That's going to change the market because they will get it right. They will then supply that market, which cuts out that market for some of the USA, UK, South African suppliers, or they've got to compete on price, definitely then. And then I think it will turn around and that some of that equipment will come to Europe as well, because the price
Yeah.
comparison is going to be huge. Um, I remember going back to that lecture that you said about one of the big considerations, as well as servicing, is the quality of the equipment in the first place. Even down to what kind of steel is used for manufacture. So the longevity of your treadmill. I know some people have had their treadmills and they're perfectly fine after 10 years. We recently had to change ours because they wouldn't cover us for servicing anymore. But honestly, there was not much wrong with the treadmill that we couldn't have carried on for another 5 years. So it's a bit like new jeans. I hate the new machine. I hate it with a passion because I've got so comfortable using the old one. And some of the changes I think are detrimental, and they've been done to basically keep costs down. And then what you've done is kind of taken away your uniqueness and your reason for being slightly more expensive than the other machines on the market. So I think things are pretty competitive at the moment. So if you're doing a deal, you can don't just take the price you quoted either. Drive a really hard bargain too.
Yeah.
And yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different, compared to when I bought my treadmill, underwater treadmill, there's so many different companies now. So you've actually got a choice. That's
Yeah.
why that lecture of yours is really important,
Probably
because
need to update it now, though, don't we?
you
It's time
probably
to
do.
revisit. Yeah.
I do think so, yeah. And you got to go through all those things and really, like, maybe what you can do when you update it is to do like a checklist for us,
Yeah, that would be
go
good.
through
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually have a checklist. So when you're
Yeah.
buying it, you're looking at all those things.
Well, a bit of insider information is Wendy is in Hong Kong, and she's going through this process. She started with a pool, which is a perfectly sensible thing to do. She's now reached the point where she's looking at, can I add water treadmill to my services,
Yeah.
and going through all of this. I think another thing you have to look at is finance. So people tend to start from how much does that treadmill cost, and it's not quite the right way to look at it. It's obviously a factor, but it's also, are you self-funding or are you borrowing from the bank? At what cost? That's changing massively now. Are you leasing? And do they include the servicing in the lease? Is it lease purchase? Is there a payoff at the end, a bit like you have with cars? And all of these things have to be costed properly to get the true cost of the treadmill. It's not just that top headline cost.
Just looking, from your experience, from the people that your students, and for what the charges are for you in the UK, is there a big difference in what you would charge for an underwater treadmill session in
Yeah.
comparison to a swimming session? So you're charging more, right, for the underwater treadmill than you would for
Yeah, and
swimming?
quite a lot more. So I suppose 50% more at least for the water treadmill. The way we do things, there's always going to be two people. There's going to be someone in the treadmill always with the dog, unless there's an aggression or handling issue, and someone outside operating, observing, giving feedback. So minimum two. Often we have 3 or 4 staff because of the kind of dogs we're looking after. If it's a spinal large dog, we're trying to get the gait right. You've got someone stabilizing the dog on the treadmill, someone supporting pelvis, someone placing. You're up to 3 people. It's got to be costed. And similarly in the pool, if it's a single person hydrotherapy session, that's the standard charge. But some dogs absolutely need 2 hydrotherapists to start, one to protect airway and guide, one to stabilize spine or hind end. So it's costed not so much on the cost of the equipment, very much on how much involvement is required from the staff and how many people. How much is it costing you to have those people stand there for half an hour, and then you've
Yeah.
still got the getting the client in, getting the client out, the advice, seniority of staff required for that treatment as well. So there's lots of things come into it. I think a lot of centres charge double for a water treadmill session than they would perhaps for a pool session.
Is that a standard kind of
I
way
think
with
it's my feeling. I couldn't put dead numbers on it. Different centres will have different sort of pricing structures. We try to not. We try to avoid it being a choice where the client, there's such a differential that the client is pushing for pull, we want the choice to be what's the correct treatment for the dog and their condition, not which one is most expensive. And if you have to charge more, which we do, then you need to be able to justify that. And they can see, there's two of you involved. There's a lot of talking and planning and discussion going on. So they can see the difference. But, when it's just a hard email coming in saying, how much do you charge for hydro? And you go through the costs, they can't see why it costs as much as it does. And in certain cases, I think people are going to need to put up their prices at the moment, and yet they can't because of the downturn in various economies. It's just not an option to put up costs at the moment. Just the cost of people getting to us traveling for an hour each way plus the cost of hydro is prohibitive for some people. So there's quite a move now to say, can I come every other week, not every week, etc. So people are seeing that sort of change as well. Certainly in the UK, that's starting to bite quite hard, I think.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that is also worrying is electricity. I mean, we know that energy is a problem at the moment all around the world. Let's chat about that. I mean, what is the difference in energy requirements for the underwater treadmill versus the pool? I mean, both are being heated, but obviously the treadmill is drawing on electricity in order to function continuously, and especially if it's busy throughout the day. Do you have any information about that? I mean, looking at...
I don't have exact numbers, and the reason is that it depends very much on your electricity contract, what you're paying per kilowatt. But as a guide, a treadmill will typically have a 2 or 3 kilowatt heater, but it's actually only heating when the treadmill isn't being used, which is a fault with some treadmills, because if you're busy through the day, the temperature in the tank drops because you have to have circulation going on for the heater to be working, and circulation can't be happening if you've got a dog in the treadmill and you've got the treadmill full. So you're playing big catch up then overnight or towards the end. So I can't put exact numbers on it, but what you could do is ask your manufacturer to give you the details for how many kilowatts would be drawn, if that heater's running continually. So you could work it out yourself, actually. If it's 3 kilowatts per hour and it's a 24-hour, maybe knock off 7 hours, that would give you a kilowatt usage per day, and you can work out your cost. But then you've got the additional cost of running the pumps, etc. With the pool, the normal system would be that it would be running and filtering 24/7. We certainly turned down our heating at Christmas, say, where we're closed for 5 days. But it's so difficult to cost because you've got your cost of heating depends on your heat source. So is it air source pump? Is it solar? Is it a mixture? Is it oil? Is it biofuels? There are so many variables and it's so difficult to cost, Certainly when you're looking at premises, I would say the worst thing you can do is have an electric heater, pure electric heater for a pool, because that's massively going to cost you. You've got a big surface area. You're using a lot of heat all day. But again, there's country differences as well. Can you have solar? Would solar work perfectly well 6 to 9 months of the year, but you need a backup? So it's really difficult to cost. And I quite often see Facebook messages saying, can you tell me how much it'll cost to run my pool? Well, even if we take one liner pool indoors and we go, okay, we're going to use the same heating for that pool, what insulation have you got? How warm are you going to keep the room? There are so many variables to working out, and it's a bit of a shocker when you start your business and realize what it's costing. And it's very difficult to separate the electrical cost of, say, running an electric heater for your water in the treadmill or for your water in the pool from the electric you're using for lighting, for heating. If you've got a pool, you need, and the pool's at 29 or 30 degrees, you've got to be heating that room continuously. You've got to have decent airflow. You might want to recapture the heat you're throwing away. There're just so many variables. Certainly on our training course, we ask people to do research on this so they at least realize the questions they should be asking and be thinking about and what some of those options are. So to answer your question, no, I can't answer it because there's just too many variables. But we do know how to keep it down. All the tricks for doing that, which is insulation, look at your working hours, opening hours. Don't be open when you've got one client every half hour. You want to be shortening your hours and maximizing the use of your equipment, and you don't want to be heating and lighting when your clientele don't justify. So we used to be open in the evenings pre-COVID. We don't open in the evenings now. I never felt it was particularly cost efficient with staff, etc. And we honestly haven't missed it, and we're now heating 8 hours a day less, sorry, 8 hours a week less by not being open into the evenings, which is
Yeah.
massive over the months and over the year.
Yeah, I mean, here in South Africa, we're obviously lucky with our sunshine.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have solar, but I had these black pipes that you put on
Yeah.
the roof where basically the sun just heats them up. And I was really excited about
That
putting
is actually solar. So it's called solar thermal.
solar
So a
thermal. Yeah.
refined version of that is also a liquid in those pipes that superheats, and then you have a heat exchanger. But that works really well. It's an excellent system.
Well, it works so well that one day my temperature was so high
Yeah.
that I had to put cold water into my
Yeah.
tank
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make it cooler. And
Yeah.
we had to keep switching off. And we actually couldn't use it in summer. So in summer, we stopped using it. And we'd only use it in winter to heat up when the sun was shining in winter. Because in summer, literally, if you were like too busy and you didn't go and change it and redirect it, you could very quickly make it too
Yeah,
hot. And you
absolutely.
have to put cold water in.
And the same problem, Singapore, it's 32, 35 degrees all the time. Any of the tropical countries, it's super hot. And then you're looking at keeping your tank indoors to keep the water cool, completely opposite. So you have to sort of rewire your head about things in different countries.
Angel, let's chat a little bit about that. We chatted already now a small amount about the space that you've got involved, and we've been chatting now about underwater treadmill or pool.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody wants both. And like Wendy from Hong Kong, she started with the one and now she's got the other. So I think that, if you're thinking that way, when you're looking at your space, you have to be having that thought, right?
Yeah.
So if you've got a certain space and you want to have both, don't put a massive, massive pool in and then you don't have space for the underwater treadmill. So these are all things like in your process of starting, you can't just be one tracked. Like, I'm going to get a pool, and then you got to be thinking about where you're going, what are your goals, how you see your practice in the end, and how you're going to fit both of them in, because there are benefits to both. I mean, for example, you've got both. I only had one. I didn't have space for the pool, so I used to have the underwater treadmill, and I was very lucky. I had a hydrotherapist just down the road. If I needed cases that needed hydrotherapy, I would just refer to her and she would refer back to me. So her and I had a great relationship. But Wendy now, for example, started off with the pool. Now she's moving on to the underwater treadmill. Can you chat a bit more about that and your experience with hydrotherapists that you've been dealing with, exactly like Wendy? What advice you would give them?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it's about space. So, are you going to have to move to have the space, or have you factored in the space from the beginning and left a nice gap ready for a treadmill when you're ready? If you're starting with a pool, then just one or two of you. So the is that a word even? I don't know. But the person who starts up, it's got to be an owner boss probably, and then you're going to have perhaps one assistant, one member of staff, and that works fine for a pool. You're not going to be able to run that pool and the treadmill with the same staffing, so unless you close the pool. So when you're calculating your costs of having the treadmill, you've got to calculate, am I going to have extra staff in to help? So one person could be swimming a dog in the pool while two are at the treadmill. Immediately you've got a number of member of staff required. Or are you going to zone your day and go, treadmills in the morning, or if we've got treadmill going on, then we lose the pool session. And so you need to add that into your costs, because you've just undermined your existing business. So that's a huge consideration. And very often, and we've had this battle over the years about how many people does it take to do a water treadmill session, but I would say minimum of two. And so if both of your staff are going to be there and you're not using the pool, you've lost that income. If you do 4 treadmill sessions in a row, then that's 2 hours of non-swimming in the pool, where you could have had 1 or even 2 hydrotherapy patients in the pool. So you've got to cost that as well. And there's that kind of it's a real step up, I think, really, in knowledge required with the water treadmill. And that's I think both modalities require different physicality from you. You know, are you able to bend down and kneel on your knees? I'm getting to the point where that's, fairly difficult now. You know, do you want to be kneeling down and hands on in the treadmill for 6, 7 hours? Those of us that are getting older are sort of using our younger staff because they're more bendy to do that. So, you've got to consider, and I have other people who've started a similar time to me who are also going, do you know what? I'm done with this physically. I love running around the pool. Treadmill, I'll do the observation and clever bit. So there's that to take into account as well. So are you going to have to move because you want to add water treadmill because the demand is there and you can't fill it? But it's still, you come back to costing. Are you going to, you might be, it feels like you're getting a lot of referrals and they really want water treadmill and the vets are asking for water treadmill, but really drill down on that and say, how many treadmill sessions a day or a week do I really think we're going to have? And if it's 10 or 15, is that going to pay for pulling you away from the pool? Is that going to pay for the treadmill? Is it going to pay for the cost of running that treadmill? And the numbers don't always stack up at all. And is it actually better to have a really good relationship with someone who has got a treadmill and work together? So the opposite way round to how you worked.
Yeah.
We didn't have a treadmill for 7 years. We did perfectly well. I wouldn't be without either my pool or treadmill, truthfully. But if someone said to me, which one do you want broken down? I would take the treadmill broken down because we can still operate with the pool and we can still see, I would say 70 to 80% of our patients we can use the pool for, but I
Great.
can't go the other way to the treadmill with those fitness swims, maintenance swims, multi-joint OA, sort of end of life palliative care dogs. They're not going to be going to treadmill. I need that pool for those.
So I think that really comes down to what you were saying at the beginning of the live, is that it really depends on your clientele, right?
Totally.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have both. So you've had both and you can choose. I just had the one, and I would go underwater treadmill every time. And maybe that's just because what I'm used to. But I mean, I had a 3-week waiting list on my underwater treadmill, but
Yeah.
I wasn't seeing those fun cases. I
Yeah.
wasn't seeing maybe 1 or 2 overweight cases, but
Yeah.
I wasn't seeing those kind of cases. I was getting a lot of referrals, a lot of post-operative cases. So I think it really depends
But
on
then
your
you were a
clientele.
rehab vet in a particular
Yeah,
market where actually people could also take their dogs swimming in the sea or use their own pool.
yeah, no,
So
exactly.
they're not going to be coming to you. But how long did it take you? I'm turning it around now. How long did it take you to start to be 4 or 5 days a week using the treadmill, fully using it?
It was actually quite quick. And I think the reason is because I had a clientele already. So, I
Yeah,
mean, I had my own practice at home and I was consulting at that time at 3 different practices. So I was seeing probably 5 or 6 clients a day before I actually opened up my practice. And all of those I had already nurtured into the underwater treadmill.
so you
And,
already
and that
had
was
that demand, didn't you?
exactly. And a lot of those I was referring to hydrotherapy. And, a lot of them were neurological cases. There might have
Yeah,
been hip dysplasia, cruciate ligament ruptures. And I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So that was my reason for getting the underwater treadmill. I
yeah,
was just like, I'm not happy with my results. I'm missing something in my treatment. And I thought underwater treadmill was my answer. And so that's why I just jumped, feet first
yeah,
into it. And with that, with the current referrals that I was already getting, when I had the underwater treadmill, it did take a while to get referrals from new vets, but the vets that I was practicing at, so I was renting space from 3 different vets, and they automatically just referred straight
yeah,
away to me.
yeah,
So it took me a lot longer to get all the other vets to refer and for
yeah.
them to understand what the underwater treadmill was. And I can actually even remember contacting Onlinepethealth, at the time and telling them this is what I'm going to do, and speaking to one of the surgeons there. And he was like, it's never going to work. You're never going to have a veterinary practice just doing this. And then I remember about, sure, it must have been about 6 or 7 years later, I remember seeing in the newspaper, Onlinepethealth gets their underwater treadmill. And I was like, yeah, just 7 years
Yeah.
behind. Yeah.
I remember. over 20 years ago now, we were just starting to dig the hole basically for our pool. And one of the neighbouring vets, who's retired, so I can say it now, came round, stood on the pile of cow dung actually and nettles, and said to me, "It'll never work. You can't do it. You can't even have a pool like this in a polytunnel." And yeah, and then hated us for the next 5 to 10 years because we encroached on their space and their idea of the world. And I remember I had impatience, and I had 3 dogs in carts. It was like wacky races, and I was walking down our track and she was walking alongside me, and we actually had a really cool conversation about what rehab is and why I do what I do. And I thought, what a turnaround, but she just stood there and said, "Won't work." And how many people have been told this? The accountants, it's heart over head. Of course it is. If you didn't have that heart about it, you wouldn't have the passion to do it, would you? Because you just wouldn't have the energy. If it was purely, a checkbook bank account thing, get another business. You've got to have that passion. So, and we're still here, and they're retired and gone, and yeah. But I think the demand for Treadmill is very much vet led as well. It's what vets see when they go to conference. It's where the marketing is, where the CPD is, and it's much, much less understanding about what hydrotherapists can do in the pool. So the vets think about Treadmill as being very controlled and technical and measurable, which it is. But a case came up recently where we were discussing, say, with a hip dysplasia dog, and having to explain, look, the Treadmill takes the hind limb into retraction passively, and will potentially take it too far. And actually, if we want to protect the dog from extending the hip and stifle too far, I might choose pull. I might still have a lot of control about what we do. I think so. I don't know the situation with who you were referring to with the pools and things, but it's down to the skill of the hydrotherapist and their knowledge and understanding as well. And for you, being a control freak like I am, obviously having that treadmill and that control over the quality of treatment and targeting that treatment correctly, it would be a very attractive option. And that's why I said I think also vet physios coming into the hydro field also feel and mentally go the same way, because the reasoning and the clinical reasoning for water treadmill treatment makes sense. And it's only when you then have experience. So we run a course for vet physios who have qualified as vet physios. They've done a tiny bit of hydro, but they really don't have the experience, and they still have to do their pull work. And it really changes their mind about what you can and can't do and which patients you would choose to put where. So for instance, elbow dysplasia dogs, we would always put in the pool because I'm going to get better range of motion, better, many more repetitions. I will get the results that I need from the dog being in the pool, whereas they're going to have trouble with perhaps weight bearing. They're going to shorten the stride in the water treadmill. So it always goes back to that clinical reasoning and what clientele are going to be coming to you and where they're coming from, doesn't it? And then underneath that is, how are you going to pay the bills? And which option, which modality is going to pay the bills. And it comes back to that original premise, the whole point of this conversation. How are you going to pay the bills when you're a startup for those first couple of years? How are you going to establish your name? And how are you going to build up enough clientele that the recommendations from that clientele then go on to create more business for you? And I think from that respect, I think the pool is a much stronger option. You don't have quite the same investment. You could choose to. You are more reliable. You're probably going to cancel less appointments because you're not going to be broken down. You have more flexibility with the pool. And I think it gives you a more secure income for those, that so many businesses fail, don't they, in the first year, and then take 10 of those, and how many 9 out of 10 will fail in the second year. So I don't see that pattern, that theoretical pattern quite with people in hydrotherapy, but there's a high failure rate and there's a high burnout rate as well, and what's going to put a smile on your face and what's going to keep you coming in, and where is that value for your clients, their perceived value for coming to you. So I just think the pool, if you can do it, is a stronger option for security of income.
Yeah. Great, Angela. I mean, we've touched on so many different things. That you mentioned now in February, you're traveling again. Is that when you're going to Hong Kong?
Yep, going to Hong Kong to a new startup business there. So it's getting busy again there. It's been really difficult. When I started teaching these people, they didn't even have a centre and they've had to open. What we've really acted as is mentors and helping with difficult cases. So we've had sort of Zoom meetings where I'm standing on a desk to show them how the dog should be moving and what to do and using my dog. So it's actually been interesting as a sort of a teaching modality. They're really, really engaged students. Obviously, they're making mistakes because we're not alongside them. So it's been frustrating waiting to get there. So excited about getting to Hong Kong again. And after that, big deal, we're going back to Canada, to Vancouver Island in May. So I barely unpack and then change and then just swap one jet lag for another at the moment. So I'm functional today, which is good. So yeah, so Hong Kong February. So it's more of a private rather than an open course. And then Vancouver is a really good centre. And the pool there was built as a copy of our pool in the UK because people emigrated, copied the pool. So we're going there, and we're also going to a vet practice, hopefully to do a bit of water treadmill training in Vancouver Centre. And then who knows for the rest of the year. I noticed our mystery Facebook user is Emina from Poland, who trained with us, talking about going to Poland. My partner's a little bit concerned about proximity of Poland to Ukraine at the moment, which I kind of understand. But and up until yesterday, and I'm joking, but it's fairly alarming, I was just saying, look, they're nowhere near. It's fine. But yeah, so we might be doing some short courses in Europe as well. So yeah, it's exciting times, and I've sort of I'm not retiring. That's a vicious rumor, but I'm certainly doing more teaching, more lecturing, and a bit less day-to-day running. So I'm sort of calming down a little, and my manager, who's taken over and bought grey fries from me, is getting greyer by the day. So as it should be, I feel. So yeah, so a few changes. So and I'm looking forward to next conference in Cape Town, because hopefully I can make that one. So I couldn't make Cambridge round the corner, but hopefully you can get to Cape Town. So,
so that's November 2024. We're still finalizing dates.
Yeah.
Amina says it's as safe as never.
I know. I'm winding her up. She's so easy to wind up. So that's why I said it. So yeah, I'm excited about that. Be interesting to get there.
Angela, it's been wonderful having you online. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge.
It's gone. It's just so quick. Yeah.
So quick. We'll definitely get Angela on. As she's talking, she's telling me things. I'm just writing the next Facebook Live topics that we're going to get on to do, because she'll say I can talk about that so much. Then I'll go, okay, that's a good topic. So I've written down a few, Angela.
Happy to do a few more. Things are a little easier to schedule now, so it'd be great.
We'd love to have you. Cheers, everyone. Have an awesome day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Angela. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. A big thanks to our sponsor, Curacor. Their sponsorship allows us to be able to give this podcast to you for free. So please go and check them out. You can go to www.curacor.org. Do you want to get access to our free membership? Well, we update the webinars in this area every few months. You can sign up at www.onlinepethealth.com/free. For more information about continuing education for vet rehabbers, you can go to our website, onlinepethealth.com.